are joined today by Brian Montgomery. So glad to have him back on the podcast. Many of you know him and his story. Brian, I'm going to let you take a minute, though, to introduce yourself for any of our new listeners who may not know how we met and why you're here, really, what your story is.
Yeah, sure. We appreciate you having us again. And the way this relationship started was the loss of our son, Walker. Walker was a victim of sextortion on December the 1st of 2022 and took his own life. And right away we had no idea why Walker would do this. I mean, we're just a normal family, and Walker had a great social life, had no suicidal tendencies, and we were just at a loss. And once I don't know, it's probably 8 weeks after learning of what happened to Walker. Over 8 weeks after he passed away, we learned of what happened and what the circumstances were that caused him to think he needed to do that. And we had an interview on Fox News, and that the word started to spread that we were talking about it. And you guys contacted us about doing a podcast, and you were one of the first podcasts that I did. And it was, it was a great asset for our family. Number one, that your listeners and your nextTalk team was right there with us, comforting us and praying for us, and gave us a platform to share that message because we knew how important that was to get out. And so we, over the last 2 years, going on 2 years, we've been on multiple times and talked about different topics, and we just appreciate the nextTalk listeners and all of your staff, and of course you, Mandy, and Kim for helping us through this phase of our life. So that's kind of the
we'll link the podcast, that original podcast with you. So if people don't know your story, they can go listen to that. But it was a sextortion. We had worked a lot of sextortion cases at nextTalk, but a lot of them were over a week's, months periods of blackmail. I have this picture of you. If you don't do this, send me this money, that kind of thing. And it always gave the kids time to think it through and process it and try and seek help. And with Walker, the predators got super smart on how to put these kids in a corner and panic. And we had never seen anything like it. Just a couple hours between the sextortion scheme started and then we lost Walker. A couple hours. And I guess we know all this because of the FBI and their investigation and going through the phone. That's how you found out what actually happened. But it was something we had never seen before. And it really shifted too with him not having any mental health issues, any red flags. It's like you also have to shift as a parent, not only how you think about sextortion, but how you think about suicide. Because we're losing kids with none of the traditional red flag mental health issues to these schemes. And so at nextTalk, we really wanted to shine a light on that. And you were so brave to come on. And after you shared your story, so many families contacted us that this same scheme had happened to their kids. And so I thought this was a rare situation. It took me off guard that we had so many people contacting us. Right. But now you've walked through a cancer diagnosis, but you also travel and you speak and you share Walker's story. You've been in DC working on the Kids Online Safety Act. You've been trying to raise awareness in all these different areas. Also, you have, for our listeners who don't know you, you're married to sweet Courtney, and you have 3 other children also, Walker and 3 other children, correct?
Courtney and I were married. We've been married, like I said, I have 25, 26 years, and just a fairy tale marriage. We have a great relationship. With Walker, we have 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. And so after losing Walker, of course, it's a new life for all of us. And our kids have been at the center of that as well, trying to continue to be, parents to them and lead them in a way that's godly, in a way that's going to prepare them for their futures. And so it's been a challenge. It's been, and then to compound that, like you said, a cancer diagnosis in September of 23. It's been quite a journey, but we know that God's got a plan for this. We know that He's using it to affect others. something that we could not have done on our own, or without these hardships, we couldn't have done. So, on one hand, we're thankful, but we're careful to say how thankful we are because we need a little relief.
Well, and I want to talk about that today. You know, parenting through grief,
Hmm.
pain, trauma. I mean, you guys have been through it all. You've lost a child and then the health situation. And,
Yeah.
you know, the thought that comes to mind when I see you and you're still speaking and you're still raising
Mm.
awareness and, you know, fighting for new laws. The thing that I always think is, you know, he's just such a good dad and a leader in the household to keep going. And he keeps going for his wife and his kids. But tell me about that. Like what does keep you going, Brian? Because from the outside looking in, that's my perception of
Hmm.
you. But tell me what keeps you going.
Yeah, it's 100% our faith. I mean, Courtney and I both have talked about it over and over again, and just continue to try to encourage one another that I can't be the dad I need to be or the husband I need to be for Courtney or for my kids, and I can't. If you look at life through a temporal perspective, all these catastrophes would overtake you because it's if you just think about life as you're born and you live a life and you accomplish things and you have relationships and then you die and it's over. Well, then that perspective, I can't relate to how that how you can keep going in circumstances like these. And so that's obviously not our perspective. Our perspective is from an eternal standpoint, and we believe that we'll see Walker again. We believe that this life is a very minimal part of eternity, that God has prepared a place for us, just like He promised us in His Word that He would, and that Walker is in that place right now. Um, and that we're our job here is to help enlarge that kingdom, and so how we do that is different for everybody, but we're confident that the circumstances God has brought us through is has been a process of sharpening our sword for this battle that we're in life, and I think that that's not a fun perspective sometimes. I mean, it's more fun to think about the football game on the weekend, or the baseball tournament, or whatever the things that we all have going on, and those things are fun. But God has a plan for us to truly carry on a spiritual battle here on this earth, and that perspective is what keeps us moving in the right direction, I believe.
Your faith is so strong, and I hear that in you. Was there a time that you questioned or you wavered, like in your flesh,
Yeah.
of why does this have to happen to us? Like I can you speak into that?
That there's glimpses of that all the time. I mean, that there's a daily fight to recenter on that promise daily. I mean that, and sometimes that can be hourly. I mean, really just depends on the circumstances of life. But you know, um, I tell people sometimes we don't have these conversations quite often because it's pretty difficult. But you know, the night that would have been within the first 24 hours of losing Walker, I mean, we were um, dark, really dark place. And so, that was a time where, lots of questions about our faith, lots of questions about eternity, lots of questions about why us, why Walker. Um, but God didn't leave us there. And I think um, that's the God we serve. I mean, he is not going to leave us in a place anywhere. He's not going to. He wasn't. He hadn't left us then. He just. I think that was a point where um, we had to. God was asking, "Do you believe what you say you believe?" And I think that's. I say that often is, we say we believe in eternity. We say we believe that Christ is the center of everything that we do, and you know, how we behave and how we react and the things we say and do are a reflection of what we believe. And that point in life where we were, um, I'll say where I was, that first 24 hours after losing Walker was is close to what I think hell would be like as I can imagine.
Thank you for sharing that. Um, it's almost like hard to move past that because it's like it's such a moment. I mean, I can't.
Yeah.
And here you are, being strong and doing all these things, and I see that the inner strength comes from somebody more powerful than you. And I think that's the cool thing that I see is God, you having that foundation of God being able to carry you through the darkest of moments.
Yeah, I want to encourage, because I think that's the goal of this conversation you and I are having, is that the parent that's out there that's living in this grief, um, I don't want to think about it as grief. I want to think about it as, there's a period of time where I miss Walker. That's what it is. Is I miss him, and even though I miss him, though I know that he's safe. I mean, he's well taken care of. But I don't think if you're a parent that doesn't share this faith that we are blessed with, you can have that perspective. I mean, I think you've got to acknowledge, and I had to acknowledge it. I had to acknowledge it even in that night I was describing, that, you know, how am I behaving here? I'm behaving as if I don't believe this. Even and it was such a, of a confusion of emotions and thoughts and ideas, and I've said before, this spiritual battle, Satan is sitting there feeding you with lies, the same lies he fed Walker. And that person, that parent out there, or sibling, or whoever that's experienced this extensive loss and is having to walk through grief, if you don't have that faith to latch on to, um, I don't see how it's doable. I've said this before to you. I don't want people to see us as a victim. I don't see ourselves as victims. Sometimes you can get that mentality, but I don't see ourselves as victims. I see us as victims. I see us as warriors in a battle, and that this battle is hard. It comes with casualties. It comes with injuries. It comes with all kinds of risk. And but fortunately, the person in Christ that is leading us through this battle has all the power and has all the ability to see us through it. And I've got to latch onto that, and I have to latch onto that daily, intentionally. And without that, I just don't know how you can move forward. And I know there's a lot of parents that I've encountered that are not Christians, and I'm not saying that from a judgmental perspective, um, but to be functional as a real causal agent, especially when you start thinking about it from an eternal standpoint, and affecting the kingdom. That's how we move forward.
Yeah, I think, that reminds me of the Bible verse that we will face trouble in this world. We will 100%.
Hmm.
We weren't promised that everything is going to be great. In fact, following Jesus is going to be harder than not, right?
Yes,
Because of the persecution and the troubles that will come our way. I think for our listeners out there who may not have a relationship with Jesus, I think what I want to do is like just give them hope that it's available to you. You
absolutely.
can pray to receive Jesus. If you've been mad at him, if you've blamed him, that's fine, because that's our flesh. That's normal
Hmm.
processing, don't you think? I mean, what would you say to that person out there
Yes.
that is like, I don't have a relationship with Jesus. I'm mad at Jesus because he took my kid. I'm done. What would you say to that person if you were having coffee with them right now?
God has the infinite ability to forgive and forget. I mean, that's what he's all about, is forgiveness. That's his absolute core, and where that originates from is his ability to love unconditionally. And that's where that originates from. God, that's who he is. I mean, he created us out of love. He directs us out of love. He sets his commandments out of love. All those, everything that originates from God's character, despite what some people in our culture would try to point to, God is love, and so that allows him to forgive us for whatever we've done. And he was tempted at all points, just as we are. So there's nothing that we've done, nothing that we've encountered, no feeling that we've had that he didn't have whenever he was walking on this earth. And I think that's for a purpose. That purpose was to show us that, Brian, you're not alone in this. I know right where you're at. I know exactly where you're at, and where I've, a story, the story that comes to mind often is, with Christ, with Jesus and Lazarus. Lazarus was a really important person to Jesus. And, Jesus knew what was going to happen. I mean, the story was that they came to Jesus and told him that, Lazarus is sick. And these are people that are really important to Jesus personally as he lived on this earth. And so um, basically, Jesus delayed and allowed Lazarus to die. And when he gets there, he knew that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. This was not something that was a revelation to him, but he still wept. Well, why did he weep? It wasn't because he didn't think he was going to see Lazarus again, because he saw the pain that the people around him that had to experience for this point to be made of the power that he held. And so I just, as that parent, and I see that for myself, I think that Jesus looks at me and says, Brian, I'm sorry, but this is something you got to contend with. I mean, but it's not forever. It's not forever. And I know how you feel, because I cried too.
Yeah, I think, the promise of scripture is not that we're going to avoid pain, but that he'll be with us, that he'll carry us through the pain, that he won't ever leave us in the darkest of moments, or whatever we're walking through, or whatever questions we have. He won't leave us. Mm-hmm. And I think that is just the true peace that surpasses all understanding that we talk about with scripture, that we see in you. You've gone through all of this stuff, and there's a peace and a stability in you, even still. And that's the God in you.
Yeah. Well, I've said this before too, and a lot of the things we talk about here are things that I aspire to do and aspire to be. I don't have it figured out. This is a daily struggle. It's kind of like knowing the answer, but knowing the answer is just part of it. Knowing how to behave, knowing how to think, knowing how to feel. That doesn't change where those real feelings come from and how things get sidetracked, and how I think about, I want the life we had before any of this is what I want. I mean, that's what my flesh wants, and that's what my family wants, and that's I think that's a perfectly natural desire. But God continually reminds me that, Brian, that's what you want, but that is an earthly desire, and what I want you to want is to impact my kingdom, because you have a phenomenal opportunity to do that. And it's hard to think of these circumstances as opportunities, but when you look at everybody that Christ used, that God used throughout the scripture, he used them in difficult circumstances, and they had to go through those difficult circumstances to be usable by God. And so he reminds me of that often.
Well, I think that's why our audience and just us at nextTalk, it's just been we relate to you so much. It's that I know the answer, but I'm a work in progress. Because that's kind of been our philosophy this whole time, of parenting a phone, of keeping kids safe online. It's all an experiment. Nobody really can be called an expert on this. We're the first generation, right? No. And so that's one of the things at nextTalk that we've always said is we're learning. We're telling you what as we learn, but it's a process. It's a process here. Yeah. And I think as you have processed your grief, that's the same way you've approached it too. I mean, I know the answer. I know who's in charge, but this is a fleshly process of walking through this. I can only imagine, because you're processing your pain, you're helping your wife process her pain, and you've got 3 kids processing that they lost their brother, and also, I guess, the mom in me just feels like this is such a shocking thing that happened to Walker. I mean, it was such a shocking thing back then. Yeah. Nobody had really ever heard of it back then at this time frame. And it was a new, whoa, wait a minute. To me, in my mom brain, I would have been become so overprotective of my kids. I wouldn't want them to leave the house. I would have thrown away all the phones. Like tell us what your response to all of that, just on a normal parenting journey of, I've got 3 kids that I'm still parenting every day, and how you didn't swing the pendulum so far in being afraid, I guess.
Yeah, that tendency is absolutely there, but I think that, there's two points I would make relative to that. One is, we can't, I mean, you said right then, just, you're afraid, and we can't be driven out of fear. Our actions can't be driven, based on fear. And I think that's a clear directive in Scripture that we should not fear, and that God is in control, and that our fear, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't fear because of our own abilities, but we've got to not fear because of His abilities. And so we can't, I can't, and Courtney can't parent out of fear of what happened to Walker, um, you know, overreact to our other kids. And the other side, the other point is balance. Are there more restrictions now than there were before? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's things I didn't know. I mean, there's things that I didn't understand. There's the seriousness of the world we live in, has completely changed. And for us to just act like things are just like they always have would be irresponsible. And so that idea of, balancing our fear and our and that balance and how we approach discipline, how we approach, the things that we want to protect our kids from is what we've done there. And it's certainly not perfect, because I could see the look on people's eyes. I've been in a lot of different meetings. They say, well, do your kids still have social media? Well, Bennett does not. Bennett's just turned 15. Probably fixing to have to cross that bridge with him. All his friends, everybody has some connection to social media. Sarah is 13. She does not. Our 20-year-old, of course, she's grown, and she came through before any of this even happened. So I mean, um, so we've got some work to do on all of those. But what I tell parents, number one, is if we think that we're going to just completely take it away from our kids, number one, we're going to set them at a really severe disadvantage competitively in the society we live in. Communication is going to be conducted through tech. I mean, we can like it or not. That horse is out of the stable. It's going to happen. And so if I know that danger is still going to be there when they turn 18, I need to start. I mean, just there's all kinds of things we educate as parents. We want to put into our educational planning, to educate our parents, I mean, our kids, about whether it was drugs or alcohol or, premarital sex, or you fill in the blank, all those things that we need to be educating, about. This is one of those, and it's going to be here. And us thinking that we can just, exclude it from our lives, I think is number one. It's going to create a lot of division in our family. We're just going to not we're not going to parent based on fear, and we're going to continue to be vigilant, but we're going to continue to love our kids and try to educate them. I think that's the end of the day. They've got to understand that there's things here that are dangerous.
Was there ever a moment where you were like, let's just go dark and not talk about this, and we don't want to put it out there, and let's protect our kids? I mean, I could see the draw of that, even though I feel like God commands us to bring things into the light, because we can't address things we don't know. But was there ever a moment or a temptation to be like, let's just not talk about this anymore?
Not really. I mean, I guess that's probably part of why we're in this situation, just from a standpoint of who we are and who, what my personality is like. I mean, I really, I'm a straightforward, always been that way. Just try to be as transparent as possible. I think we can avoid a lot of problems that way, and pretending something didn't happen doesn't make it not happen. And I also felt the need to, even though Walker did what he did, I felt the need to defend Walker, in terms of how this happened. I mean, I think, had there been no communication, it would have left a lot to question about, who we are as parents, what kind of family we are, what kind of person Walker was. When we knew that was not the case. We knew who Walker was. We knew his character. We knew his personality. We knew all that about him. And I think that I felt some need to defend that. That Walker was victimized. Walker fell victim to a scheme and somebody that was a predator. Have there been times where we were tired of talking about it? Yes, absolutely. There's been times where it's just like, I'm just tired. I'm tired of this being the central focus of our family, and we've tried really hard to not let this be, everything. Our kids, for our other kids. I mean, I could see where it could become resentful. They could start to resent this as being the change. Because I mean, they're still teenagers, right? I mean, and I could see where kids could get there, but fortunately they haven't, and they have encouraged us to continue this fight, and I also think it's prepared them for being better citizens. I think that better people. I think they're going to see how to handle adversity better than most, and so I think as hard as it's been, I think it's going to be a good attribute to their personalities.
Walking through fire, it develops character, it develops perseverance and
Hmm.
strength. And you guys have all had to walk through fire. I think that's another reason, too, though, why we were so intrigued with your story and wanted to have you on right away once we got to know you was Walker's character. And
Yeah.
and the fact that these predators, and we've traced it back to other cases, they target the good kids because the good kids have a lot to
Yeah.
lose. And so they target people on social media that have it all together, that have the wonderful family, that is in the
Right.
Christian home. I grew up thinking we go to church, we pray, we talk about being a good person, it's fine. And that's one
Hmm.
of my main messages at Next Talk is like the good kids are becoming victims of all of this stuff online because
Right.
we have to go the extra step of raising the awareness about the online dangers and the conversations about that, and we have to know what's going on in their culture.
Yeah, I think I would say that relative to what happened to Walker with sextortion, I think you're spot on. I mean, that's exactly right. What's interesting though is the predators. They find a way to they find a weakness in whoever they can manipulate, and so the kids that are more prone to uh, whether it's drugs with fentanyl poisoning, whether it's the kid that maybe is not as confident as say a Walker was, they may bully. There's all kinds of these different things that we're having to encounter now, and so they're all at risk. And relative to the Christian community, I think that many times we've got our head in the sand about some things. I remember a church I was speaking at, and usually I'll have a time at the end where I'll just answer questions, and I'll never forget this. There was a guy in the audience, and he was I would say early 70s kind of guy. Struck you as a very fundamentalist type believer, and his question was, Brian, if you would have, do you think that if you would have done more uh, Bible studies, and I mean, it's not exactly how he said it, but his implication was if you'd have been a better leader in terms of spiritual leader for Walker, would that have prevented this? And what I can, on one hand, it really set me back, and I didn't want to make a scene in the audience, but I thought about that a bunch, and I really, if I could go back to that moment, I would ask his name and ask him to walk up on stage, and I would point blank, okay, do you remember making any uh, real mistakes when you were 16? And I want us to talk about them because, different then is that, if you'd have made a mistake like Walker made, nobody could have seen it. Nobody could have recorded it. Nobody could have ever repeated it, really. Um, but you made that mistake at that age, and we're dealing with a different time now. And so, it was just this. It was a very judgmental way of looking at it, I guess is what I'm saying. Which I understand. People are people, and I think people see things in a stupid way sometimes. And he did, because I'm not saying that there was no there that we were perfect parents or that Walker was perfectly discipled in our home. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying that, yeah, I mean, obviously, if we'd have been having a Bible study that night, maybe Walker wouldn't have chosen to do what he did. But my point is that taking a step back, and realizing who we are as people, Christ died for our sins because we sin, and it's that we don't want to. We try to improve that through His strength every day. Um, but as believers, we've got to open our eyes to the real risks that our kids are facing.
Well, one of the things we always say at Next Talk is, all of us are still learning. All of us. Our
Yeah,
kids, us, there's always something that we wish we could have done differently if we know the outcome of something. That is being a
yeah,
human. right? That's being a human.
That's right.
I think I want to say to you, don't let Satan have any of that with your heart. You know, don't,
Yeah.
because you are a good father, you are a good husband, and I mean, anytime, say a kid has a car accident. In your mind, you're
Hmm.
thinking, I should have gone back. Why didn't I teach them about that stop or at that? Or, like we
Right.
always question when we go back. But there are some things that God says this is going to happen in this time, no matter if you're
Hmm.
the perfect parent or not, which none of us are.
Well, I think that ties directly into the conversation we're having about how to continue living a what I'm going to consider a profitable life in spite of grief. And I think there's a lot of parents out there that would could relate to that, that shame and that, you know, all those things, all those emotions that are tied to, if I'd have done something different, I wouldn't be in this situation. My child wouldn't be in this situation. And you know, there's always a balance. I mean, we can't let I use the analogy. I mean, we can't let our 2-year-old play in the 4-lane highway. I mean, that's irresponsible, and bad things are going to happen if we do that. Um, but let's come back into a balanced conversation of, you're doing your best and things happen. Um, sure, there's things I could have done different, and we've talked about those, on this show before. But um, I think how we move forward to that is not what happened in the past, but what are we going to do in the future? And that's what I would encourage that parent, that's dealing with grief and maybe even wearing a lot of that on their back is, you can't go back. If I mean, it's a common kind of a joke. It's not, it's a joke, but it's not. I mean, somebody will say, what can I do for you? I was like, well, if you can create a time machine, that would be perfect. I could fix a lot of stuff with a time machine. Um, but so we've got to look forward. We got to look towards the future and do what we can going forward to be a better parent, to be a better spouse, to be a better friend, better brother and sister, and have a kingdom perspective is what I would encourage
I
people to
think
do.
what fires me up though about that question that you got asked is, and I walk through Christian parents through a lot of stuff, and many of them are
Yeah.
scared to talk at their church and say, my kid
Hmm.
is struggling with porn, my kid shared nudes, my kid they don't want to share it because of the judgment. And
Yeah.
what I've been trying to do is say to churches, that should be the first place parents run to for help. Why
No
aren't
doubt.
we allowing a space where we're not judging parents or saying, when did you give your kid a phone? Or if you wouldn't have done that, stop. It is hard
Hmm.
being a parent today. Let us run to the church and get support and help as we're navigating these issues. And so I get kind of frustrated on that side of it.
Yeah.
And I know I don't want to be church bashing here. Of course, the church is full of people and we're all still learning and we're all trying to fix. So let me flip it a minute. How has the church been positive in your life? Because let's talk about the negative response of the church and those judgmental types. But how has the church been positive in your recovery and walking through this?
I talked about whenever, shortly thereafter losing Walker, and Courtney and I just trying to figure a way to go, and how to even face another second of life. And very early on, God, I mean, we were just praying, God, you got to give us something here, and it was just a reality of God's going to answer that prayer through people. And that's what he did. I mean, he sent our community that was we were close to, our friends, family, church. I mean, I would I want to step outside the connotation of using the church as a building. I mean, all these people, the majority of these people go to a church, but they're people that, our church is our community of believers, and they were just there. I mean, they were there to listen. They were there to help with planning Walker's funeral and everything around it. I mean, everything around it. They were just there, and I'd encourage people that we could not be where we are today without those people. And I think that it's a natural human, need to to have people around you that can relate to what you're going through, whether they actually have had that happen or not. You see that they're in pain like you're in pain, and that gives confidence that this is number one, is real what I'm walking through, and there's people here that really care, and that brings comfort. And I think that is 100% ordained by God to be. That's how he answers prayers, is through people. Are there times biblically where he chose to just put his hand on a situation and fix it? Sure, he did. But in terms of how he daily accomplishes his goals on this earth, is through people, and that's the church. And there's people that I would say there's people that have come into our lives that are not Christians that have been great assets to us. And so it's not completely tied to just believers. But my point in telling you is that I believe those people are going to become Christians because of this interaction. So um, it's been phenomenal to see how people have reached out and how they've been for us. And I would say that goes for your audience. I mean, Next Talks, listeners and committed followers have been unbelievable. And that was why I want to expand that more than just a physical church. I mean, because that's been a huge part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I still get stopped. How's Brian? I'm praying for Brian, and and you're just so relatable, and you're such just like us. You're real. You're real. I'm going to say it how it is. You're
Yeah.
transparent. I mean, that's the Next Talk way. And so when you
Hmm.
first came on, I think immediately it was just we relate to him. That could be our kid. I remember picking my son up from basketball practice that day after I recorded with you. And the whole way there, I thought that could be my son. That could have been my son.
Yeah.
Because it happens to good kids. The predators know who to target. And so, just your realness and rawness of walking through that and relying on God has been hopeful. It's been inspirational,
Yeah.
that you could face this and still get up in the morning and make a difference.
I guess everybody's different, but it's when you get forced into a corner, and we didn't choose this path. I mean, we would not have, and even know. I mean, it's I don't know how people would perceive this comment, but even knowing the impact it's made, um, I wouldn't do it if I could not do it voluntarily. Um, could not, and so I believe God knew that. I believe that He understands that, and I mean, it's just like he that picture of him, crying at Lazarus, tomb, and seeing the pain. I think he has that same emotion towards us as people, and and so it's real. I mean, and so that aspect of what we're having to go through is it's we make choices every day of how we're going to approach it. Um, but sometimes it's just where's the fire least hot, and I think the path we've chosen, uh, it's the path is not as hot as it would be if we just sat back and walked away from God and walked away from the people that we know we can affect.
When you said we wouldn't choose this path, even knowing, the awareness we've done and the other kids we've helped, the picture that I pictured in my head when you said that was Jesus right before the crucifixion, when he goes
Yeah.
and he prays to God. Jesus himself, a perfect human being, says, "Please take this from me.
Hmm.
Please, I don't want to do
Yep.
this." And then he
Yep.
surrenders and said, "If it's your will, it'll be my will. Your will be done." And I think
Yep.
so many times we have to walk through fires in life that we would never go through. As human beings, we can't see the other side of it because we couldn't even fathom it. We
Hmm.
wouldn't do it. We wouldn't say yes. We wouldn't surrender. And
Yeah.
I just think that's a beautiful picture of you know you having to walk through something that you would never choose. You would never choose.
Yeah, and I won't, and I don't know how to best encourage other parents that are dealing with that grief. I can never think of it as an opportunity, even though it is, even though eternally it is an opportunity. I mean, I envision a day whenever I'm standing before Christ, and this impact, you're going. I hope, my hope is that that I can see the impact that Christ made through these issues, this walk we're walking through, and I see then at that point that it's worth it, and there's a special joy related to that. And I want to encourage, other parents that are in that spot to, I can't tell you to see it as an opportunity, but I can tell you that it is. It is an opportunity, but I can't tell you to see it that way.
You've been given a burden that, I mean, I just can't imagine, you know. And I
Yeah.
think as biblically, we have to carry those burdens with you. We have to come alongside of you and
Hmm.
say, how can we help you? How can we, raise awareness so this doesn't happen again? All those things of working together and
Yeah.
supporting you as you have been given this horrible thing that that you're walking through,
Yeah.
that you'll walk through until you see Walker again.
Yeah. But speaking of moments, those moments are more difficult at key times of the year. I mean, we just came past Walker's birthday, and that was, most days we wake up and we keep ourselves busy enough doing and going and taking care of things that we think about him all the time, but it doesn't get you down like it did once. Um, but there's key times of the year, and we're coming up on the holidays, and like I said, we just came past his birthday. That was really hard. He would be a senior this year, and happened to be, it was on a Friday, so we were with his classmates at football games, and that was hard. I mean, that was really hard. And coming up on December the 1st, which would be 2 years after his death, that's going to be really hard. Thanksgiving, we had traditions at Thanksgiving that it's going to be, they're going to be without him. Christmas is obviously going to be a difficult time, and I think that's just bringing that point out to other parents. I mean, that's natural. Those are memories, is what those are. Those are times that we remember how many things we encountered together, and and that grief becomes more difficult to contend with in those situations. But you can do it. I mean, we're going to be, there's going to be parts of those times, and there was, with his birthday, there's parts of that day that were just down and out, and there were parts of that day that were joyful, where we could remember and spending time with him. And so just um, encounter those situations, and know that you'll get past them, um, and hopefully over time they'll get easier. I don't know if they will, but um, we hope for that.
Anything else you want to say to a mom or a dad who's just walking through an incredibly hard time in their life and they just feel like they cannot get out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, I would strongly encourage them to connect to somebody that they trust, that they know loves them. That they can walk through. Yeah, I don't know how you could walk through this by yourself. Whether that's a spouse, or whether that's a friend, or whether that's a family member or somebody at church. Um, what I was talking about earlier. We were talking about how the church came alongside us. I mean, that those relationships had been prepared long before all these disasters. Um, and we didn't know, going through life, we didn't know how important those relationships were going to be at this point. We all view our friends and family as important relationships, but sometimes we neglect them. Sometimes we don't value them as much as we should. Um, but now I see that a little different. I see that, if you haven't had to encounter this type of issue in life, um, know that those relationships are there for this, as one aspect of those relationships. They're there to help you through these situations, and don't take them for granted, and value them and build strong relationships. And if you're in that situation today where you're having to walk through it just like we are, I mean, lean on them, because that's how God will answer those prayers, I believe.
I think that's a word right there too for anyone who's not going through grief is, value the people around you. Value the people around
Yeah.
you. So many times we get caught up in teenagers being annoying, and they they are sometimes,
Hmm.
but
They are.
really valuing each day that you have with your loved ones.
I mean, it's both sides of that. On our side, we were the recipient of those people coming alongside us. But that, like I said, those relationships were built over time, and some of those were built on us going alongside those people when they needed us. And so that's a fellow told me one time. He said, "If you want a friend, be a friend." And I think that's good advice.
Well, Brian, I appreciate you. You're always being so vulnerable and transparent, and I appreciate that. And I know God's going to use it and help other people. So I appreciate you being here today and
That's
sharing.
our prayer.
Make a donation today at nexttalk.org.
This podcast is not intended to replace the advice of a trained healthcare or legal professional or to diagnose, treat, or otherwise render expert advice regarding any type of medical, psychological, or legal problem. Listeners are advised to consult a qualified expert for treatment.